Welcome to the Halftime Report, powered by Sports Cannabis. This is your host, D-Ray. I'm here with my man, Eugene Monroe. That's a mean-ass name, saying that all the way through. But retired NFL pro, you know what I mean? Entrepreneur, cannabis advocate. You involved with a lot of things. I seen you a traveler on your gram, family man. So we're going to get into all of that. But how you feeling today?
Oh, man. Caught me on an excellent day. Like, I really just I've been elated, since early afternoon. We've been pushing for a while now to ensure that we win, on the real estate for our New Jersey business, because it's an extremely competitive market for property that meets the cannabis zoning criteria in the jurisdictions that have allowed for it. So we got our spot. I won't say where, but just excited about what we're going to do in the home state, right? Like I did, I was a part of New Jersey's second round of applications with Green Thumb, but this is my own business that I'm leading at home. So just super pumped with what happened today. So yeah, I'm excited to talk to you, and let's get into it.
Bet that. So you said you're in Maryland before we hopped on here. You said Jersey's the home state. So is it East Coast for you? I'm out in Phoenix right now, but I'm hearing a lot of.
It's been pretty much always East Coast. I went from New Jersey, grew up in Plainfield in South Plainfield, and went to the University of Virginia from there. Went straight to Florida after the NFL draft down to Jacksonville. And from there, the Ravens brought me in, but my wife is from Baltimore. So we essentially brought her back home to her family, and we're building our life here in Maryland.
I love that, bro. I love that. All right, so I gotta ask, did you play any other sports coming up?
So yes, for a blip in high school, I played team handball, and almost no one knows that. My trainer was involved in the Olympics with the sport, and they were trying to get some club movement going in New Jersey. It was mostly adults, but our high school was full of athletes that all went on to play Division I sports. So we were certainly athletic enough to compete with the adults there, and we did. I also did track for most of middle school and high school. I didn't do it my last year of high school. I threw the shot put. I was horrible at discus, but our shot put squad helped us win states 3 years in a row. Myself and two other of my good friends who were also football players, also linemen. So just like the biggest, strongest guys around, we were all over 300 pounds too. So we just ran the table with shot put. Really, that's it. I wrestled for a year, and I was really bad. But, the way I see it, I started in 8th grade, and by that point, everyone's been wrestling since they were kids. So I'm wrestling guys that have technique that, I just don't know how to even deal with. But what was fun about that is I remembered each of the dudes who beat me, and they were also linemen, and I got to destroy them during football season every year for the rest of high school. So that was fun. And then also like 1 year in basketball. Anyone who knows me will literally probably laugh at you if you ask them about me playing basketball. And I'm not shy about it. Like I have no game at all. None. I'm the last person to get picked. And if I get picked, I'm fouling out the game. So yeah, that's pretty much it.
No. So all right. So was it the not being as good as other sports that made you trend towards football, or was it just something about football that you were like, nah, this is what I'm gonna stick with. This one I'm gonna put my all into. Like, what made that? Because I played tennis. in high school. I kind of dabbled with track at one point. I was like, you know what? Something about basketball, it speaks to me on a different level. So what was it that it was like, nah, football is it for sure?
Interesting question. For me, I was really forced into playing sports. Or coerce rather. So I was not an athletic kid. I was the biggest kid around, but playing sports was the last thing I wanted to do. I was a straight A student and super interested in math and science and tech and art, gaming. So while the other kids were playing ball, I was in the house, playing Final Fantasy and then all this other weird stuff. And then I still do to this day. So the other sports, I started and gave those sports a shot before I really even understood athletics. So, if I probably, by the time I got to high school, and really, because I really only played in sixth grade, that was my first year of football. And all the kids had already been playing since they were 5 years old by then. So, just no skill sets in sports really, because I never did it. Now I had the ability, I just never accessed it. But in high school, I saw an opportunity to use football to change my life, to use the sport to get out of Plainfield, New Jersey, and change the destiny, even for my family. So I took it super serious. I started training every single day. I would leave class, go to the weight room, leave class, go to track practice, go to the weight room, leave class, go to the weight room, go to track, go back to the gym for speed and agility training. So we were, doing track at the same time, getting ready for the dawn of what really, we see now as all of the high school Nike camps. When I came out, it was the beginning of all that. And, we were going hard at the opportunity. I just never was interested in sports. And even with football, I can't say that I had the same love for it that everyone else that played did. For me, the competitive nature, the physical nature, those were the things that drove me, not necessarily the game itself, which is, I love combat sports too. I grew up and did martial arts prior to, doing anything directly sport related. So
it's crazy.
I can't say I didn't love the sport because I had so much fun. It was life-changing. I developed life-changing, lifelong relationships in it. However, I retired and could care less about, I haven't had a day where I wished I was on the field, which has been kind of nice.
No, that's good. And it's good to walk away from it cleanly like that. It's crazy. You sound a lot like me in the sense of you were aware of who you were outside of it. Like I didn't start taking ball serious till I was 15. Yes. I know what that feels like, but how did you balance that understanding of yourself outside of the game and yourself inside of the game? Like how did you keep that afloat for so long?
Well, the concepts in football, while difficult, for me, were easy to grasp. So it didn't require a ton of time like it took other people to understand what was going on. So I would still be engaged in, all the other things, right? I would, for example, when I was in Baltimore, I would get out of practice. It was cool. I had a chance to pick up my daughter from her daycare, her early learning program, drop her off, see the family, and then go downtown and learn how to develop commercial real estate. So I was always engaged in something outside of just the sport itself. And really, the sport and the culture tries to make athletes believe that every ounce of their time is catered towards the sport, but there's so much more. And that really handicaps players when it's time to retire and all they did was dedicate their life to the sport, which abruptly ends, and that transition to something else becomes difficult because they never really focused on anything but the sport. And it's difficult too, right? We're asking athletes to do a lot. We don't ask doctors to go to medical school and also play a sport, right? They go to medical school. If they play a sport, it's rec or it's some hobby fitness league. But you're asking athletes to be full-time athletes and full-time students. You have two full-time jobs. So it's difficult to have time to even do something outside of that realm. However, like I'm, just continually pushing all the athletes I can touch to take that extra time and sacrifice those hours to ensure that you're preparing yourself for your life that is much longer than your athletic life.
That's dead facts. I think when I go and talk to, especially like younger athletes, like, like middle school and high school, that's one of the things I stress for them to understand. Like, listen, you calling yourself a football player or basketball player or soccer player or volleyball player, whatever you're calling yourself, be careful of how much you convince yourself that's all you are. You have more to offer. You are more than that. And both of us understand what it's like to have to fully give yourself to something in spurts, but that shouldn't be your entire life. Because like you said, God willing, if you play up into the point, for ball players, the age now is like 35, 40, you would hope that somebody would have as much time, if not more, outside of the game. And that's when figuring out who you are outside of the game plays into that. But like I said, I had to touch on that because when I heard you talking about it, I'm like, hold on, this is how I felt. And there aren't too many people who understand that. A lot of people, when they turn 6, somebody put a ball in their hand and it was on since then. You know what I mean? They make it to the pro level. Rarely ever do you hear about somebody kind of starting a little bit later or really picking it up later and them being so pleased in it, but also so pleased out of it. Shifting gear back to the NFL, it's funny, you had talked about your college days of being a student athlete and being a player. And for me in college, that was the reason I asked about the balance is that was when I lost a little bit of it. In college, this is a full-time job and there was no time for anything outside of it for me. So that it messed me a little bit because I'm a film guy. I'm really big on film. But in college, I remember hearing this saying, my coach would say, you can play hurt, but if you're injured, get out. And from what I understand, for y'all in NFL, it's a similar, for y'all, it's you can play injured, but you can't play hurt, right?
It's essentially the same thing, right? If we can't use our last resort, if there's no pharmaceutical that will allow you on the field, then you're hurt. Then you shouldn't be on the field. But if there's any way we can brace, wrap, tape it up, give you Toradol, Vicodin, if there's any solution, no matter how bad it is, right? No matter your labrum and rotator cuff can be torn and they expect you. In fact, my last year on the field, I hurt my shoulder twice that year. And the second time really damaged it. And it was the second time I needed surgery to repair my shoulder. However, the team said it was strained and I should be able to play. I couldn't lift my shoulder. I couldn't lift my arm in the pool doing the rehab to get back on the field. And 3 doctors who reviewed my MRI noted the major tear and damage and need to have surgically repaired. The perspective that the team has is often, out of line with reality. Yeah, when I hear it with other players and it becomes public, because they are skill position with, bigger fame, it's like I expect to see those stories. And it doesn't matter what caliber of player you are, because eventually you're going to become expensive, you're going to miss games, and someone's going to be cheaper than you, younger, and less hurt than you.
So at what point did Cannabis come into the picture for your recovery?
Let's see. I guess my intro to Cannabis, really, I've intro for a lifetime, not as a user, but being around it. And then my bachelor party, my brothers and friends were all just, hanging, having a good time, and they passed the joint around and I hit it. And I don't remember being high. I just remember not feeling my back and knee pain from raging around Vegas all day. And so, I was terrified from that joint till, my next drug test, just thinking like everything I've built, because when you fail a test for cannabis, they just try to destroy your character. And everything I built, was super positive, and I was just terrified that if I tested positive, I ruined all of that just from that one experience. So really that kept me away from any continued usage. I had a surgery, and that surgery really changed everything. I had a surgery on my shoulder after the injury I told you about in December of 2015. And I was taking the prescription opioids that the doctors prescribe after surgery for pain mitigation. And my daughter was walking down the hallway in our house through the double doors. I was sitting up in my lazy boy chair in my bedroom, and I just didn't recognize what little kid was walking up to me in the house, and just realized that those pills were making me crazy, and I wasn't taking any more than was prescribed on the bottle. My wife would come, on schedule and hand me the pills. So, that was really when I decided that, enough was enough with the pharmaceuticals. Yeah. I had been on a daily regimen of Celebrex and or some other medicine to, really deal with the symptoms the Celebrex was causing, because that's a really powerful anti-inflammatory that I was taking for all the different swelling in my joints. And the different acute issues and the chronic issues with the left knee that I suffered my entire career. Yeah. And then on game day, standing in line on the T-train, right, getting ready to get the Toradol injection just to really make it through. So enough was enough. And by that point, really in the background, I had already been studying cannabis. Maryland had legalized for medical use and put out the RFP process to apply for licensing. And it happened to be during the football season. And after I looked at it and realized, the amount of bandwidth it would take to get through the application process, I really thought my time would be better spent, investing. So I did that too, and got started. And really like that period of being injured, choosing cannabis over the pharmaceuticals after having a really negative experience in my home, that really drove me to really travel the world and meet all of these doctors who were saying all these things about cannabis, but it was new to me. So I spent my time, money, showing up to places, meeting people, spending time with different families and physicians to learn as much as I can along with my research, and really got to a point where, I just realized everything the NFL was saying was inaccurate, to say it nicely.
So guys who were using around that time, because I heard a lot of guys talk about it. I remember back in 2018, Bleacher Report had did this thing. They had a group of NFL players and they had a group of NBA players. And the group of NBA players had a scheme or a certain way that they would work it to where they understood where the drug tests were coming. And it wasn't as prevalent. It was people were aware of an NFL, but the consequences seemed a lot more dire for y'all than it did for the NBA players. So guys who did use it, or guys who were interested, how did they go about it in those days when it was like nobody was talking up on it and nobody was speaking up for the plant?
Yeah, well, it's tough, right? The drug test, from one end on the NBA side, you're probably going to have guys test, differently on the NFL side, because one, you got a population of men who are much bigger, carry, more fat body mass. So, that cannabis stays in their systems longer, and the likelihood of failing a test is going to be higher there. So like the systems that are created in any league where drug testing exists and you try to skirt the test, do have some issues that, are not equal for everybody. But furthermore, just in overarching, there's no reason for the testing to be happening anyway. Why are we testing adults for cannabis? And they continue to test. The rules have changed. But players are more actively using cannabis. And I know this because they're hitting me up, asking questions. They want to use it because they don't want to become addicted to opioids. They've seen enough of it.
That's what I'm saying. Like, I remember, so I was, like I said, I'm watching the John with the NBA players. They had like Matt Barnes, Al Jefferson, Steven Jackson. Keeping it being with you, they had the usual suspects on there as far as the weed go. But I liked it because they went right at it. And Matt Barnes was talking about he got to a point in his career where he would smoke every part of his routine. So he would have that morning shoot around. He'd be sober for that. Then they go back to the hotel. You probably got about 5 or 6 hours to the game after that. He was saying that he was like, I broke all my fingers and my toes at that point. So I would smoke real quick, get in the tub with some Epsom salt, take a nap. And then by the time game time rolled around, I was feeling good enough. I was sober enough to play, but I still was in a bit of a groove and felt better. And to me, it was just kind of like a light bulb went off, like, hold on, everybody wins if these players can smoke or use cannabis however they want to recover, because they'll feel better because of it. But with that said, this is the halftime report. That is halftime. We halfway through this, John. So we're going to take a quick smoke break. I got to ask what you smoking on. Oh,
some
man.
Guava, some
shit like
nice.
That.
Yeah, man. I know you got something nice over there.
I got a pre-roll. I'm over here. I'm taking advantage of being on the West Coast and getting these pre-rolls. Right now, it's
I prefer to smoke my own weed, but I ended up giving it all away.
What you mean?
So yeah, just like the weed I grew, when friends and family come over, I typically just, grab a handful and throw it in a jar, and I wasn't tracking it, and ended up giving away all my weed, but I grew some pretty nice white truffle.
That's love. What's your favorite? The dabs, the oils?
Take the dabs, man. Just get to the point. It's so much cleaner than, burning flower and plant material, especially when you have something nice like a nice hash, nice rosin.
I like that.
Sure my temp is right. You gotta use the dab right.
I like that you on it.
You heat your banger with the torch.
Okay.
Then you use your dab right, so you ensure that you get the right temperature. So, my dabs come out perfect every time.
So let me ask this, because you're very well versed, and you were talking about your routine with it as far as like meetings and when to use it before workouts and after workouts. How long did it take you to get that regimented with it? How long did it take for you to understand this is how much my body needs of this is how much of that? How long did that process take?
Quite some time. Really, because there's really no reliable source.
It's one-on-one. It's your body.
And everyone's body responds differently to every genetic. So really, just I've been fortunate to have good friends who are growers and breeders who, have been able to, one, put me in front of probably some of the world's best product, but also like understanding how really good weed is different, and finding genetics that work for me. It's like that white truffle that I can take, it's my pre-workout of choice.
Let's say when you were first starting off, you were first starting to smoke, you starting to get into it for real, somebody who had been in for years, what's the best advice they gave you?
Yeah, I mean, when I got into it, I went hard. I think I went as hard as you could possibly go to learn. I was on a mission, one, to get my tolerance as high as anybody's. And I think I'm there. I mean, you get to a point where like people argue about who can, out smoke who, but I mean, there's just a point where you can just keep going. But what that does is allow you to, really experience the minute differences between each genetic, right? If you're not getting your mind blown by, taking dabs of San Fernando or GMO, then you can start to learn how it's affecting you. So I've been able, through just time, to figure out like which genetics I should probably take, whether it's getting ready for a workout, getting ready to be creative, play a game, hang out with my family, going to a meeting, and then also the differences between what environments those meetings take place.
In 2016, you speak out about cannabis, and you're really the first one to kind of come out and be like, listen, I'm still playing and I'm speaking up for this. Because you'll hear guys, they retire and then years down the line, they start to talk about it, but you were still in the mix of it all. And while that was happening, there were a bunch of other things happening as far as race issues and race relations within the sport. What about this plant made you gather the courage to do that? Because that is some courageous shit. Because at the end of the day, the wrong person feel the wrong way about it, and somebody could be out of a job, or somebody could be in a sticky situation where, like you said, they come after your character. Like, what was it that made you
so not a single person around me thought it was a good idea. Not one. Not my wife, not my friends, not my agent, not a single one, because they all knew what would happen, and they were all right that I would be blackballed for talking about cannabis in that way. But again, by that time, I had already toured the country and met with families who had children with debilitating conditions that, and again, like I have a son with autism, so I understand how when you have a health condition in the house, it changes everything for a family. But cannabis was giving these people some type of normalcy in their lives back. I was seeing all of this real benefit while hearing the lies the NFL was telling players, and it's not like they were being honest about head trauma, for example. So why would I think they'd be honest about another medical issue? And enough was enough. Like, I knew what was real and what wasn't. And quite frankly, like, our brains, were more important than and getting that message out and potentially changing that was far important to me than, being blackballed.
Love that, man.
Yeah. It was, I didn't feel right holding on to that information for myself, right? Like it was time that a conversation was started. And again, like there were players before me who failed tests and, became the martyrs for really that mission. But, I saw opportunity to be strategic in the messaging, to hire people to help me, hone in, not only, on a way to communicate, everything that was real, but also be ready for, all of the backlash, because it's not something people believed in. So, whether it was, different, writing exercises or different drill sessions with CNN analysts, we kind of just went through the ringer, and every time I was interviewed, there was really nothing the interview could say to me. They weren't more educated on cannabis than me, certainly. And when you understand the opposition, because there's only really a few things they can say in concert because it's not real, it was actually pretty easy. It just required consistency. We reached every NFL team and, got just, a less than a handful of responses that, again, we're in a new age, and as a you have to have at least read an article about cannabis, but you can't tell me you don't know anything. I mean, that's not right, especially if you're a doctor that prescribes opioids.
I told you I was a movie guy, and the movie Concussion, starring Will Smith, where he plays the doctor who had tipped the domino that started a lot of the conversations about the CTE discussions, came out in 2015 when you were still playing. Did that change the kind of the climate of like people being like, well, hold on, what is going on with this? Or what happened to such and such? Or, you know what I mean? Like, did that kind of wake some people up, or did you feel like it was just another notch in the belt?
No, it woke people up for sure. I won't say it woke me up. It was an issue I was already in front of, but it certainly, did help me make the decision to retire.
Mm-hmm.
Just that's damage you don't recover from. It's literally a lifetime of repetitive head trauma. Even if you don't have an event where you're seemingly concussed to others, where you're pulled out of competition, you're still incurring repetitive damage to your brain every day, even in practice.
So how did you deal with that? Like, how did you to come to grips with that? Because to be honest, more times than not, all we hear are the horror stories. We hear about the terrible endings. We hear about the the guys who took their lives. We hear about it's such a polarizing issue, which either side is speaking on. It's kind of like politics. They're going to use the most extreme example, and they're going to use the ones that don't turn out well. But you're like more of a triumph story in that. So how did you deal with that? How did you get through that? All right, this is the reality of my life. It's here. What's next?
Yeah, again, I built what's next already. I was already one of the largest investors in a cannabis company that now is one of the largest publicly traded in the world. So, I was already in this, and more importantly, what I saw was my family. I saw my kids and my wife, and the ability to get real time, back that you really don't have as an athlete.
One of the things you jumped into was the Heart Community Capital. So you got to talk to me about that.
Yeah, I built it and still building. So part of my journey in cannabis that I really hear, but I was live seeing, is that there's a lack of minority, ownership, participation. You see us sprinkled very lightly in exec spots, but overall, it's a white business. And I built Heart Community because of that fact. And I saw very capable, successful Black people be shunned out of opportunity after opportunity, while white people who can't grow weed get licenses to grow weed, and just none of it makes sense. And it's not that the talent, the aptitude, the ability is not there. And so, building this with a network of friends who, we've all been in cannabis for some years and have seen this, and have the ability to invest in minority owned companies, to incubate and help build those companies, partner in many cases with some of them. For example, we've invested in a retail operation owned by Armani White and Sean Birdie, two equity empowerment applicants who were actually working with an MSO. They were working with Forefront Ventures. Forefront was investing in them, but ultimately decided not to. And so while they sort of trailed for years looking for opportunity, we decided to partner with them and help them build their business, and like super excited about what's coming to Boston this summer. With that, we saw opportunity to get licensing to cultivate as well. So we'll have our own product in the state. That'll take a little longer to get up and going, but we're on track there. And so it's really been fun putting it together. I just had an event at my home inviting people from all over, and probably they weren't sure why they were there in some cases, but just so many folk who have, been a part of us getting to this point.
All right, shift gears just a little bit. Back towards the NFL. They pledged $1 million. And I have my own reservations and feelings about that.
But you mean the
million towards
marketing? Yeah, the marketing budget that they're spending. I mean, look, that's not enough money to get any significant research going. It's a marketing tool. However, look, I hope the parties involved do care and are able to move, and shift the NFL's position. And, ultimately, I'd love for to not be tested, to not be considered, and maybe even provide education and access for players.
I was about to say, I couldn't even bring myself to, you got an organization that makes like billions upon billions of dollars, during one weekend, forget the year, like during one weekend of the year. And the ability to say, here's $1 million as some shit that concerns people's livelihood is just, I don't know. To me, it was borderline disrespectful. All right. So to wrap it up, somebody wants to follow in your footsteps. So far,
I mean, to be honest, you really couldn't follow my footsteps and my pathway in this. However, there are ways to do this if you got a passion for this. And I would start with, right, there's so much work that needs to be done for people in this, people who are still in prison, people who need this opportunity, people who need this medicine. So getting involved and pushing, for legislative change is really where I think people should focus on first. I mean, and the connections and people and business will really reveal itself to you once you start showing up in those spaces. But really, if you're not passionate, you should probably do something else.
Thank you for joining us on another episode of the Halftime Report, powered by Sports Cannabis. I'm your host, D-Rey. Make sure y'all follow us. IG, Twitter, YouTube, for more infused Candid talks, man. Y'all be well. Thank you.